In a dazzling city where the streets glowed under the evening lights and luxury cars sped by like shining bullets, there lived a man named Andy. Andy was young, handsome, and born into old money. His family had built wealth over generations. Tall, with kind brown eyes and an easy smile, Andy was every woman's dream. He ran several successful businesses, but he was never proud. He treated everyone with kindness, from the CEOs he worked with to the janitors who swept his office floors. Andy had married a woman named Cynthia 2 years ago. Cynthia was breathtaking, tall, slim, with a face that could stop traffic. She didn't come from money, but Andy believed in love, not background. When they first met, Cynthia was warm, funny, and sweet. She acted humble and said she didn't care about wealth. Andy believed he had found the woman of his dreams. At first, their marriage seemed perfect. Friends admired them, strangers envied them. Andy was happy, but beneath the sparkle, a darkness brewed. Andy's close friends and some members of his family began warning him. Andy, his sister Laura said one afternoon over coffee, "I don't like what I'm hearing about Cynthia." Andy sipped his coffee and smiled. "People gossip, Laura. She's my wife. I trust her." Laura sighed. "You're blind with love. Open your eyes before it's too late." Others said the same. "She's not who you think she is," his old friend Chris said, patting him on the back. "Be careful." Andy brushed them all aside. He loved Cynthia. He refused to believe bad things about her. But the whispers kept coming. "She was seen at the club last night, Andy," his cousin Mark said one evening, his voice low. "She was not acting like a married woman." Andy laughed. "Mark, you must be mistaken. Cynthia told me she was home." Mark shook his head sadly. Still, Andy refused to doubt her. But soon, Andy started noticing little things. Cynthia's spending spiraled out of control. New jewelry, designer dresses, expensive cars, all without telling him. She started staying out late. At first, she made excuses. "There was a girls' night out," she said sweetly, kissing his cheek. "There was a charity event," she lied smoothly, batting her lashes. Andy wanted to believe her. He loved her too much. But one day, something happened that shook him. Andy returned from a business trip unannounced. He was tired, but happy to surprise his wife. When he stepped into the mansion, he found the house strangely quiet. No welcoming smile, no hug, no kiss. Instead, he found their longtime housekeeper, Nora, standing by the door, packing her things. "Nora?" Andy said, confused. "What's going on?" Nora wiped her eyes quickly. "Sir, I have been fired." "Fired?" Andy echoed, shocked. "By who?" "Madam Cynthia," Nora whispered. "She said I was too nosy." Andy's heart dropped. Nora had been with his family for years, even before his parents passed. They treated her like family. "I'm sorry, sir," Nora said, bowing her head. "I must leave now." Andy promised her he would look into it. Later that evening, Cynthia strolled into the house, dressed glamorously in a glittery dress, smelling like alcohol and expensive perfume. "Andy," she gasped, seeing him. "You're back early?" Andy forced a smile. "Yes, I wanted to surprise you." Cynthia laughed nervously. "You should have called." Andy asked casually, "Why did you fire Nora?" Cynthia pouted. "She was always in my business, darling, snooping around. I couldn't have that." Andy said nothing. His mind raced. Later, he secretly contacted Nora. In a quiet cafe, they met. Nora, with tears in her eyes, told him everything. "Madam Cynthia brings strange men to the house when you're away," she whispered. "She throws parties. She drinks and smokes. She said terrible things about you, sir. She feared I would tell you. That's why she fired me." Andy felt as if the ground had been pulled from under him. He drove back home that night, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He realized he couldn't continue like this. He needed to know the truth, the real truth. And he had an idea, a crazy, dangerous idea. He decided he would pretend to lose everything, pretend to lose his sight, pretend to be helpless. He would see, without seeing, who Cynthia truly was. The next day, he set his plan in motion. He called Cynthia from the hospital, his voice trembling. "Cynthia, I had an accident. The doctors say I'm blind." Cynthia gasped loudly over the phone. "Oh my God, blind? And the investment I made, it went bad. We lost everything," Andy added. There was silence on the other end. Dead silence. Andy's heart broke, hearing the hesitation in her voice. She didn't ask if he was okay. She didn't cry. Instead, Cynthia muttered, I'll be there soon." Andy smiled sadly. The game had begun. When Cynthia arrived at the hospital, she acted sweet. She cried fake tears and clung to him dramatically. But Andy, though blind to her, could feel her coldness. After bringing him home, Cynthia changed. She no longer treated him like her husband. She treated him like a burden. Andy sat on the couch, wearing dark sunglasses, holding a cane, pretending to fumble around. Cynthia would walk past him without a word. Sometimes she would laugh with her friends, mocking him. "This poor blind man," Cynthia would say, her voice dripping with cruelty. It got worse. She started throwing wild parties at their house. Men and women he didn't know filled the mansion. Loud music, alcohol, smoke filled the air. Andy sat helplessly in a corner while strangers mocked him. He heard their words. Such a shame. Rich once, now blind and poor. Why is Cynthia still with him? She deserves better. Sometimes, Cynthia would deliberately leave things in his path, a chair, a suitcase, and laugh when he tripped and fell. "You should watch where you're going, old man," she would tease cruelly. Andy's heart broke a little more each day, but he stayed silent. He had to see, fully, who Cynthia truly was. Meanwhile, Cynthia grew bolder. She began bringing men home. Andy could hear them laughing, whispering, kissing. He cried silently at night, his heart shattering into a million pieces. Nora was brought back, only because Cynthia didn't want to care for Andy herself. Nora, loyal and kind, became Andy's guardian angel. She fed him, bathed him, cleaned him, spoke kindly to him. Whenever Cynthia wasn't home, Nora sat with Andy, telling him funny stories, making him laugh despite his pain. One day, as Nora helped him sit in the garden, Andy sighed. "Nora," he said softly, "do you think I'm a fool?" Nora smiled sadly. "No, sir. You're a man who loves deeply. That's never foolish." Andy felt tears in his eyes. He knew now. Cynthia never loved him. She loved what he could give. Money, status. When those were gone, so was her love. One afternoon, after weeks of cruelty, Cynthia came into the living room, waving papers. "I want a divorce," she snapped. Dear amazing viewers, how do you think Andy will react to Cynthia's demand for a divorce? Please keep watching to find out. Before I continue, I would like to ask you to kindly subscribe to my channel If you haven't subscribed yet, please click on the subscribe button. Much appreciation. And if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back and thank you so much. Now, back to the story. Andy's heart sank. He tried to plead. "Cynthia, please, don't leave me like this." Cynthia rolled her eyes. "I've wasted enough time playing nurse to a broke, blind man." Without another word, she packed her bags. Her new boyfriend, a young, flashy man, waited outside in a shiny car. Cynthia strutted out without looking back. Andy sat there, alone, broken. He wept, but he also smiled bitterly. He had seen the truth. He had paid the price for love, but he had survived. Nora stayed. She stayed when he had nothing. She stayed when he was weak. She stayed without asking for anything. Andy knew then. She was his true angel. Weeks later, as they sat together in the garden, Andy turned to Nora. "Nora," he said, his voice trembling, "I have something to ask you." She looked surprised. "Yes, sir." Andy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Nora, would you marry me?" Nora gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Sir, I ... Before she could finish, Andy smiled and did something shocking. He removed his sunglasses. Then he stood up, tall and strong. Nora's eyes widened in shock. You can see?" Andy chuckled. "Yes, Nora, I can see." He looked around, admiring the flowers, the sun, the beauty. "I was pretending," he said gently. "I needed to know the truth." Nora burst into tears, overwhelmed. You were testing her." Andy nodded. "And you passed the test, Nora," he whispered. "You have the purest heart." Nora laughed through her tears and hugged him tightly. "Yes," she said, "I'll marry you." Andy laughed joyfully, lifting her into the air. It felt like a new beginning. Word of Andy's shocking engagement to Nora spread like wildfire. At first, nobody believed it. Nora, the housekeeper, the humble woman who always kept to herself. It didn't make sense to the shallow people in their rich circle. But Andy didn't care about what society thought. He had seen a pure heart, and that was what mattered. Meanwhile, Cynthia's life wasn't going as planned. The young man she left with, Derek, quickly showed his true colors. He wasn't rich. He was a scammer after her money. When Cynthia realized it, it was too late. One morning, she woke up to find that Derek had emptied her accounts and disappeared. Penniless, humiliated, and alone, Cynthia sat in a cheap hotel room, clutching her phone. She opened social media. The first thing she saw made her drop the phone in shock. It was Andy, standing tall, smiling, vibrant, holding hands with Nora. They were laughing at a charity event, surrounded by the city's elite. Andy looked richer than ever, happier than ever. Cynthia stared at the screen, her mouth dry. He wasn't blind, he wasn't poor. He had tricked her. The realization hit her like a slap. Tears blurred her vision as regret flooded her heart. Cynthia decided she had to go back to Andy. She had to beg. Maybe, just maybe, he would forgive her. Wearing her best dress, though now tattered and faded, Cynthia made her way to Andy's mansion. When the security guards saw her, they frowned. "I'm his wife," she insisted, pushing past them. But she wasn't his wife anymore. Andy was in the garden with Nora, laughing as they planned their small but beautiful wedding. When Cynthia burst into the garden, everything froze. Andy turned slowly. Nora stiffened. recognizing the woman who had caused so much pain. "Andy," Cynthia cried, falling to her knees, "please, please forgive me." Andy looked at her calmly, his face unreadable. "Cynthia," he said quietly, "what are you doing here?" Cynthia crawled closer, her makeup running down her face. "I made a mistake. I was foolish. Please, take me back." Andy looked at her for a long moment. He remembered the nights he cried alone. He remembered the mockery, the cruelty, the betrayal. "I forgive you," Andy said softly. Cynthia's face lit up. "Thank you. Thank you. I'll be better this time. But I will never take you back," Andy finished coldly. Cynthia froze, her smile vanishing. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I'm engaged to Nora now," Andy continued, his voice firm. "The woman who loved me when I had nothing." Cynthia sobbed loudly, collapsing onto the grass. "Please, Andy," she wailed, "give me another chance." But Andy shook his head. "You loved my wealth," he said quietly, "not me." He turned to Nora and offered his arm. Nora, with tears of love and pride in her eyes, took it. Together, they walked away, leaving Cynthia sobbing in the garden. The day of the wedding came. It was beautiful, elegant, not because of how expensive it was, though Andy spared no expense, but because of the love that filled the air. Nora wore a simple, breathtaking white gown. Andy wore a tailored suit that made him look even more handsome. As Nora walked down the aisle, holding a bouquet of fresh white roses, Andy's eyes filled with tears. He had found true love. The priest smiled warmly. "Do you, Andy, take Nora to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and to cherish, in good times and bad?" "I do," Andy said firmly. "And do you, Nora, take Andy to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to cherish, in good times and bad?" "I do," Nora said, her voice steady. "You may now kiss the bride." Andy leaned in and kissed Nora gently, the guests erupting in applause. As they walked down the aisle as husband and wife, Andy whispered in Nora's ear, "Thank you for loving me when I was at my worst." Nora smiled and whispered back, "You were never at your worst. You were always my best." Meanwhile, Cynthia watched from afar, hiding behind a tree, her heart shattering into pieces. She realized she had lost something priceless, not Andy's wealth, but Andy himself. She walked away, broken, knowing she had no one to blame but herself. Andy and Nora built a beautiful life together. They opened charities, they traveled the world, they adopted children, and built a family full of laughter and love. Andy never looked back. He was finally free, finally happy, and he owed it all to a heart that loved him not for his wealth or status, but for his soul. Before you watch the next video, kindly subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed yet. Please click on the subscribe button and like this video. Be a part of my channel's growth by clicking on the next video on the screen and drop a comment to let me know what you think about the story. Thank you for watching. Much appreciation. Much appreciation.